Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I see all sorts of different time zones in the chat, which is super cool. And welcome to day one of AI Build Week. My name is Keenan. I'm a technical product marketer at Retool, and I'm excited to kind of host everybody this week, along with folks from our community team and everybody else hanging out in the chat. Today is day one. Like I mentioned, we've got Angelique presenting to us about how to use different large language models and when some are good for some use cases and others for others. And so I want to direct your attention just before we get going to that very first message up at the top of the chat from Sarah, which with links to resources in our community hub, where we'll be answering Q&A and doing lots of things long after our webinar today concludes. So at any point, if you want to ask a question, please either drop it in the chat or use the Q&A feature in Zoom. And we'll be collecting all of those up and answering as many of those as we can at the end. Like I mentioned, if there are questions we can't get to or things you think of after we log off here, that community thread that Sarah posted is the best place to go. So without further ado, I want to introduce Angelique, a member of our developer relations team at Retool, to talk to us about large language models. Angelique, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Keenan. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that. That was so lovely. I'm actually going to go ahead and share the presentation, so give me a few seconds. Well, okay. Welcome to the first day of AI Build Week. As Keenan already mentioned, and thank you for that introduction, we're going to be hosting this for the entire week. It's hands-on experience where you will be learning stuff from like cron, vectors, all the way to agents. And so don't forget to register. I'm also going to be giving the presentation tomorrow, which is going to be about vectors. Okay, so to get started, my name is Angelique Torres. I'm a developer advocate here at Retool, and today I will be talking to you about LLMs and, more importantly, how we can build a prompt arena to compare models to one another and see which one is better and how they perform. So for a quick overview of today, I would say is today's evolving model landscape, as well as the prompt testing. Why does prompt testing matter more than benchmarks, and building a chatbot arena app in Retool? So yes, we might have heard or be familiar with the terminology of LLMs. However, I wanted to give you a more formalized one, a model trained on massive text data to generate language. But that's only part of the story. Some of the ones that you might know are GPT-4o, you have Claude, Gemini, Llama. What is important today is that they're evolving from passive text generators into interactive agents capable of reasoning, using models, seeing, hearing, and maintaining memory. Now, traditionally, when people talked about how good a model was, they meant how big it was, and that meant how many parameters it had. For example, GPT-3 had 175 billion parameters. Llama 2 has 65 billion. Bigger meant better. But at least that was the assumption. And right now, it's not about the size of the model. It's more about how they interact with your system, your users, and your data. So when we talk about the models today, we're really talking about capabilities. So stuff like reasoning, retrieval, tool usage. We're also talking about constraints. So cost, latency, safety, and bias. And then also alignment on purpose. That means, like, does it really do what you need it to do reliably? In the modern LLM landscape, we're seeing three categories mainly emerge. We're seeing stuff from proprietary, open source, and then specialized. And when we talk about this, we have each of them finding their own specific niche, right? We're talking about something like Gemini that might be good for visual inputs, or Claude that is great for storytelling, writing, and brainstorming. Or you have something like Llama 3, which is really good for high quality code or logic task. And GPT-4 that is good for general purpose reasoning, it's fast, and it's multimodal. There's some that exist in the middle, like proprietary and open source. And when it comes to specialized, it can be like Perplexity, which is a lot more scientific, or like with citations. Again, they're all finding their own specific categories. So there are key trends that are showing up today. First one being that is multimodal by default. I mean, let's not take it like a couple years ago, just even a couple months ago, right? Most major models right now support text, image, audio, and even video. They're faster and cheaper. So competition. You also see them being bigger having bigger context windows. So that means that some models are now taking entire code bases, books, and even long transcripts. There's smaller open models on the rise. So that means that Gemma 5.3 are running on your laptop or your browser with decent quality. And I think most importantly today is the tool usage and agents. We're seeing now models capable of calling API, query databases, and act like autonomous assistants, which is pretty huge. So why is it important to care about the landscape? Well, because no one model is good at one single thing. I mean, I mentioned there's good for coding, there's good for safety, there's good for being concise, which means that building an LLM today, you need to test them for your own use cases. And you might start having the question of which one should I use? And I guess if you look online, a bunch of people are going to tell you to look at benchmarks. And there's stuff like MLRU, you have ARC, MT Bench, GPQA, Human Eval, SWE Bench, etc., etc. But the truth is that these are broad comparisons that benchmarks don't really reflect your real world use cases. They're really good at taking a standardized test. I mean, like the SATs, right? Back in the day. They don't really help your users or how to write SQL for your specific schema or how to summarize your exact data format. If I were to give you a couple examples, we have Claude for Opus, right? It ranks really high in academic benchmarks, but when it comes to production use, it can be very verbose and it can also be lengthy. Now, in the other hand, you have GPT-4o, which is fast and balanced, but might play it safe when it comes to complex reasoning. So choosing a model is more on similar actually to choosing a camera, right? Is a point data like a megapixel, but that's not all that matters. It matters more, how does it perform with your lighting? How does it perform with your subject? The composition of everything and the style. And the answer is that it really just depends. So by doing prompt testing, we can ask questions like which model follows your prompt instructions the best? Which one is concise versus chatty? Which model hallucinates less when giving company-specific data? Really important. And how does your model handle formatting, error handling, and edge cases? At the end of the day, it's not who specifically wins, it's about understanding each model's behavioral profile. But with that, we are gonna build an arena. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing here and I'm gonna bring up our information for today. Okay. There we have it. Okay, so right now somebody should have dropped a link into this drive. This is going to contain two CSVs, which we're going to be using for the project. And as you're going to be building with me, or if you just want to watch and do it later, I've created this document actually that is follow through that you should make a copy, check mark the things that you have, the things that you haven't done. And this is really good for if you're following along, just copying the code and then like copying back into Retool. So now that we have that, download the CSVs and have your space open in Retool. I'm gonna actually go into my database and I'm gonna add the CSVs. Actually, I will do it the same way as you guys. So let me just download them. Zip the file, and you're gonna go into the plus icon here and then do import from CSV. And you're gonna drag and drop it. So I'm gonna open them here. There you go. There's this one and the other one. Okay, so double click. I'm gonna go into my downloads and I'm gonna do the AI Arena model first. This is actually gonna show up the column type, and the column type needs to be fixed. They're not timestamps. We need to change them into integers because there's gonna be some mathematical equations that is gonna be needed for this to be a integer rather than a text. The name is fine, and I'm gonna use actually one of the columns to assign it as the primary key, and this one is gonna be the model ID because that is good for me. So what exactly is this table? Okay. So this table actually contains the information of the models that we're going to be using for this chatbot arena, right? The model string is something that I would explain later once we're inside the app. But for now, I'm going to use 6. There's going to be a competition between 6, mainly 2, and then rank them between. The ELO rating is something that if you don't know much about the prompt arena stuff, is a system that was created when chess was ranking its player, and it's just essentially two players going against each other and users using either thumbs up or thumbs down, thinking of which one is better. And so these are a couple ones that I've been updating as I've been building and everything, but you can also go to the leadership boards that there are of any prompt arena, and you will see this happening. Okay, the next one that I'm importing is the other second one, the chatbot arena matches. And same thing here. We need this to be an integer. And this one, no, this one is fine. This can be a text. Okay, this is the one that needs to be an integer, the one that says timestamp, because this is keeping track of the elos before and the elo after. So integer here, integer there. This is fine, and I can even do text for this one. Okay, and since I don't have a specific ID table for this one, I'm gonna create a primary key. I'm not gonna use one that is existing, so create table, and it should look something like this. As we continue testing, more information is gonna be added into this table, but for now, all good. Okay, I'm gonna go back into resources, specifically so I can have access to my apps. From there, I'm gonna create an app. Okay, now we have our canvas or the IDE. And how I like to look at it to begin with is just to sketch out all the like UI that is on the screen, right? So this is how it's gonna end up looking, right? This is what you're gonna be building in the time with me. And I can do an example of Superman v Batman. And I'm gonna have it battle it out. And you can see like model B just started out very quickly. Model A took a little bit of time, but even the structure is different. This one has finished earlier. And I'm gonna say that I think the left one is better. And it's gonna say the model that it is supposed to be hidden under the label of model A. So that was Claude. And if I go here on the bottom, I can refresh and you can see that some of the numbers have changed in the positioning. Cool. So let's start out with the title. Let's start out with the text input and also the button. So I'm going to go over here. It's very important as you go through to actually label things correctly, just because we're going to reference them to them later. So this uses markdown. So I'm going to chatbot arena, and I'm going to enable this title. Cool. I'm also going to do a text input. I'm going to delete the add-on. I don't really need it to say label. And I'm going to change the placeholder to ask me anything. Okay. And I'm going to name this prompt. Very important because I'm actually going to reference this later, specifically as prompt. If you change it, just remember to change it later in the other things that you see prompt appearing as. And then the button, I'm going to name this enter button. And it could be battle. I'm just going to do enter. There's stuff here like the style. You can even change like how it looks or like how to hover over it. So all good. Cool. The next thing that I want to do is add the model A title. So here we go. Oh, sorry, I have the thing in the middle. Okay, here. I'm gonna do model A, and this is model A title. Cool. Same thing with the model B space. So I'm doing model B, and I'm gonna do model B title. From there, I'm gonna make up this space over here, the gray area where the answers can be populated in. So I'm gonna do text. And instead of this being auto, I'm gonna fix it because otherwise the screen is gonna be really long depending on how long the answers are. And I just kind of want to scroll inside of it. So I'm gonna do something like this. And I am gonna delete the value for now. I'm gonna change this to model A answer. Okay. And then the style I wanted to show so you guys are able to see it. So I'm gonna go background. From background, I'm gonna go double click. There you go. I'm gonna choose like a gray color. And if it doesn't show up, it's because this is 0. So put it to 100 and you're good. I'm also gonna copy this because I'm gonna duplicate it here in terms of the color. So again, text, add it over here. I'm gonna delete the value. I'm gonna name this model B answer. And then I'm gonna add the style background here. There you go. And this is gonna be 100. Perfect. And fix because this needs to be a specific size. Cool. We can see how different they are. So can maybe change it like this. Maybe expand this one. Move this over here. and voila. Okay, I think we're good for now. The other stuff will be added eventually, like the buttons at the top and the leadership board, but for now, pretty good. Okay, so I'm now gonna go into the code tab over here. And what I'm gonna do is generate two queries, specifically their AI actions. So the first one is gonna be called Model A Query. And this is actually Retool AI, and we have a lot of actions that you can do, like summarize text, classify text, but in this case, we're gonna generate text. The input is gonna be the value of the prompt or the text input that we're gonna do. And how do I do that? So I'm gonna do prompt dot value, right? How do I know if that works? Well, because it's green, but if I write Superman, I hover over it, and then the value is Superman. Cool. I'm gonna save this. The model, this is something that we saw specifically from, let me open it here. I'm gonna duplicate this so you guys have access to it later. Okay, we saw it over here. This model string name is the thing that is happening in this space here, the model, right? If I dynamically set it, this is what the model string name is, right? Here it even tells you how to format it. So the provider, model name, and it has to be case sensitive. How do you find out the other names? Well, you click on it and you look at the actual names and you write it correctly. So Anthropic, that is Claude. If you have OpenAI, that's GPT. And we're gonna leave this like this for now, right? So what I'm gonna do now is generate the model B query. So model B query, cool. Same thing. So we want the prompt value to be the same for both. So prompt value, and I'm gonna save it. Play around with temperature if you would like, and depending on how concise or like how deterministic or how random you want it to be. And we're all good, right? The next thing that I'm gonna do is actually call this table, right? I wanna have access to this information. So I'm gonna go on the plus and I'm gonna click resource query and then do retool database. This is where we go back into the document and we're gonna copy our first thing. It's the select all from that table. There you go. So select from this table and order it by the elo rating in descending. And I save and run it. Always remember to save and run because otherwise the information won't be saved. Ta-da! You have access to this, which is pretty much this information, right? Cool. I'm gonna rename this all models. So all models. Cool. The next thing that I'm gonna do is generate two variables, model A and model B, and they're gonna be JavaScript variable. So here, variables, and I am simply gonna name this model A, and then model B. Amazing. This actually leads us to the next part where we're going to be setting up the values of those specific variables. So this is so it makes it easier as we interact with the rest of these variables to have access to the value, to the names, and to the model string. Okay, so go back into here, and we're going to create the new match. The new match is a JavaScript query. So I'm going to copy this information here. And I go here and I'm going to click JavaScript query. Okay, I paste it, save it, and this is going to be called new match. There you have it. So what we're doing is setting up the value, right? I'm also clearing up the answers in here. So you don't want the previous one to be there and writing on top of it. You just want it to always be fresh when the answer is new. And we're doing the randomization of which models from the model IDs, right? From these here, just randomize which ones are going to be paired up together. Okay, it's gonna run it. Cool. Now if I go into model A, I can preview it and voila. We have our first selection of competitors. We have the GPT-4o, and in the model B, we have Llama 4. Cool. So now we can actually go into the model A query and change that. So how do we do that? We go into the model A query, dynamically set the value in the model. Then I write it like this: model A dot value dot model string. And if it turns green, it means that it's working. If it doesn't turn green and it's red instead, as you write this, it's because you haven't run the new match. Run that, preview the model A, preview the model B, and then you should have this information. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to copy this exact information. I'm going to go into model B query and I'm going to paste it in. There you go. Save it. We're all good. Amazing. What we're going to do now is actually create a new variable. This variable is going to be called current winner. So this is how we determine which one is the one that you chose as the winner. Good. Next, we're going to do the update elo. So it's very important to have a JavaScript transformer so that way we can calculate what the elo is, right? This is already something that is a rating system, so we know what mathematically it looks like. That's why it was important for these to be integers. Same thing with this one, right? I'm going to go here, plus transformer, paste it in, and voila. And I'm going to name this update elo. There you go. Ooh, oh, never mind. Change the names. Another one. That was current winner. This is the variable. And the transformer is the update elo. My bad. There we have it. Okay, so what's happening? I'm gonna save it. We are taking the old elo, right? And we're keeping track of that. So then eventually we update it in the database, which is the next thing that we're gonna do. But then at the same time, we're doing it in a binary way. Whether model A wins, it gets a point. If model B wins, gets the other points. Otherwise, either model that is a loser, they don't get a point. And this is where the math is happening. Okay, so the next thing that is happening is we're gonna update the models in the DB, right? That is the second CSV that you uploaded. So this one over here, this is how we send that information through. So I'm gonna copy the SQL. There you go. I wish I could just write it, but it's too long for me to write on the spot with the constraints. Okay, so research query, Retool database, and there we have it. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run this. If it runs, great. That means that there's nothing wrong. None of your naming or anything was wrong. I will make sure that if at that step you're having issues, just retrace anything and make sure that the labeling is correct and that you're referring to things well. Okay? So this is all good. It's essentially taking the old information, sending it through, and gathering all the information of when the winner was declared. Amazing. Oh, I need to name this update model in DB. Cool. Okay, amazing. So we've done all the code side. What we're going to do now is attach it into the actual UI. So how do we do that? We go into the enter button. This is the first one that we're going to set up. We're going to go into the event handlers. And in this order, if you do this in the wrong order, you will have issues. In this order, you will call new match. And the reason is that the new match needs to be declared. The two models that are going to be competing need to be declared, because if you call the model A query, which is the next thing we're calling, and then it's not going to run because it doesn't know which model is it supposed to be using for the model string, right? The next thing that we're calling is the model B query. Okay, amazing. So now what I want to do is have the answers show up in these gray things, right? I'm going to click here, and now we can actually set the value. So I'm going to do model A dot model A query dot data. There you go. Same thing here is this is model B query dot data. Amazing. So let's see if it actually works before we continue in declaring like which one is the winner or not, right? So Superman versus Batman. Enter. The basic functionality is there. Right now, we have two models answering and showing up in our arena. If you want to change stuff just for aesthetic, you can even click here and do in the alignment, like the top alignment. So that way it's coming from the top and not the middle. And what we want to do is actually add these buttons. We want to add the left is better and the right is better. And we want to add this table. So let's do that. Okay, I am going to move this down a little bit. I'm going to hold this, this. Okay. Okay. And that seems like enough space. I'm gonna go into the add UI and I'm gonna do a button here. And I'm gonna name this model a winner. And I can do the text like left is better. And the style, I don't want blue, but you can do whatever. You can do background and then you can choose like highlight or something, right? I'm gonna add another button next to it. And this is gonna be right is better on the text. And this is gonna be model B winner. Same thing. I don't want it to be blue. So I'm gonna click here. Voila. Okay. And now adding the table. So I'm gonna add the table. Here you go. And oh, it automatically connected to a table, but we're gonna update it now. We're gonna do data source and we're gonna do all models. I can do the primary key as the model ID, and I like the way that it looks better with tags. So I'm gonna double click on model name, and instead of string, I'm gonna do tag. Now we have a little bit of color. Same thing with the model string. I'm gonna do a tag as well. That seems good. This is something that it could auto refresh, but for now, I'm simply gonna keep the toolbar because I can click on this, and whenever the information is updated, then I can see it in real time after selecting a winner. Cool, or do it manually. I'm gonna order this by the ELO rating, so who's high is gonna go on the top, and then downwards, whoever has the less point. And what I want to do is connect the buttons now into having the information be updated and also selecting the winners. But before I even do that, if you notice something in the original one, if I click left is better, this screen shows up. So we have to set that up. Okay, so I'm going to go into components, and this is called model frame. And for the sake of time, I'm simply going to divide it up in two. I'm going to do one for model A and one for model B. However, if you did this correctly, you would do current winner, and depending on which one is your current winner, then take that model name and then place it in there. So you only have one frame. Just time. Okay, so I'm going to name this winner. Cool. I'm going to add a component of text. And I'm going to name this model a dot value dot model name. There you go. That's why we have this variable specifically there so we can extract all the values from it. Okay. And I'm actually going to name this. Be careful when you name this because you might be editing either this text or this text, and you might change it to that label. But what we want to change specifically is the model frame 1. And I want to name it model frame A. Right? Makes it easier when referring to it later. So I'm going to do the same thing for B. So I'm going to go quicker in this one. I'm going to do text, and I'm going to do it again. Oops, apologies. Can't go too fast. Dot value dot model name. I'm going to name this winner. Cool. And remember, the frame itself is the thing that's going to be named model frame B. Amazing. Okay, now we can go into these buttons and add 3 events handler. The first one is going to be the frame, right? So we know that this was the model A winner. So then let's call it. Instead of doing control query, let's do control component. So that way we can control the components. And I named the model frame A, and it's going to show. That's great. The other thing that we want to do is update the models in the DB. So this table over here, we wanted to update it, right? Well, something needs to call it, and this is the perfect moment to call it, right? It actually has update the model through control query. And the last thing, which is actually here in this document, is selecting which is the current winner. So set that value. And we're going to do that by running a script. So if I click it, the third thing that is going to happen is run a script. There you have it. Same thing with the model B winner button. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to do control component. I'm going to do model frame B. There you have it. And I'm going to update it. Yes, updating. And the last thing is that I'm going to run a script. Remember that if you're copying and pasting this information, this needs to say B, not A. Happens as you're duplicating stuff. Um, that seems so good to be honest. And I'm trying to think of anything else that we're missing. Nope. Okay, then we just have to publish it. So what we're gonna do now is click here, publish, and I'm gonna publish this. And let's see if it works. Okay, so Flash versus Kid Flash. You can do stuff that is deeper than this just for the sake of this presentation. Okay, so comparing speedsters, you have stuff like very concise, you have stuff that is more like talking about powers, personality. I think for me, I like this one better. So left is better. That was Claude Sonnet 4. So if I go now here on the bottom and I update it, there was numbers that would change. Here, let me just expand it. Let's do another one so we see. So right now we have GPT 4.1 in the top, Llama 4, Claude Sonnet 4 in the third place. Um, let's do Flash versus Aquaman. This one's very fast. Okay. This is even talking about the specific one. So Barry Allen, Arthur Curry. This one is even done now. Either way, I like this one better. So left is better. That was GPT 4.1. I don't think that's going to change anything, but it's going to lower whoever was competing against it. No, it just increased this one. Okay. I don't even know which one this was. The clock. Okay. Okay. That's why we see this. But this is just a really fun thing to do. See, we even changed rankings now because I selected this one. That's the other thing. If you want to see the other model, you're automatically updating because you're setting who is the current winner. But yeah, a last thing that I want to leave you guys is that this is not the only way that you can connect any sort of like AI or LLM. So if I go back home and I go into resources, I can go into Retool AI. And then there's already like Retool manage APIs, right? Or like keys. There's other ones that you can set up by yourself. So if you have any Bedrock or Asura, or if you have like Google, any more Anthropic or any more OpenAI, then set them up here and then they will be available for you to have access to. Just for now, if you only see those four in the models that you can select from Retool AI, that is the reason because those are Retool managed. But yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing here and just go and see what you guys are either saying or not saying. Let me see. Okay. Da-da-da-da. We have one question. Does the data inserted in those models use AI to used to AI training? Da-da-da-da. I mean, I don't think I understand this one. Does data inserted in those models use for AI training? I mean, they could be used for AI training if that's the question. Or if Keenan, you have a better, if you understand the question better.
Yeah, I think I do. And again, feel free to post in the chat if we're not kind of understanding what you're asking. I think where this is coming from is this is a pretty common question that we get is like, is the data that I put into my Retool app that's then going to OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever, is it being used to kind of train their models, right? And so the way that we kind of access the models through like via the API, and by you kind of providing your own API keys, which is another question we have in the chat here, that makes sure that that kind of keeps the data private to you. But if you want kind of even more security outside of like OpenAI and Anthropic's models, we also support AWS Bedrock models, which are hosted kind of in your own cloud environment, which keeps your data kind of even more secure. We have similar considerations for Azure and things like that. So it's really just kind of a trade-off between the convenience of using the kind of off-the-shelf, just bring your API key models versus setting something up in AWS or Azure.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. But yes, that's a great answer. The other one is if I can add any external APIs or that can be used with this. I mean, the same space that we have resources, we have all the integrations that you can do. So I would invite you to just like create new and then you can click resources. And then from there, there's a bunch of already logos that you can click on or even like retail hosted ones. And then I would say like try, like, I mean, like you can do like Pinecone if you wanted to do with vectors and like integrate that, but That's the whole point, is to bring your own data and to bring your own apps or information and then integrate them in a singular space. Can you show how to customize? Can I show how to customize the app again? I think you're talking about the prompt, like the text input specifically, if that is correct. I can show it. Yes. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, maybe I'll take one of these other ones as you're pulling that back up.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got one here. Would I have access to all these models via Retool, or would I have to provide my own API keys? Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, we do have kind of to help people get going. We have a sort of Retool managed OpenAI resource, so you can start to use some of the GPT models. That, however, does have some like rate limits and just overall limits on it. So it's useful for getting going, but when you're ready to kind of ship your app to production, that's where we suggest you kind of choose your favorite model provider, bring your API keys and set those up as resources in Retool.
Okay.
Cool.
I haven't set it up here, but it's very quickly. Either way, this is going to be available to rewatch in the community. So if there's any part you got lost, just rewatch it. But if you go into the UI, just text input, drop it in, and this is my prompt, and I just label this prompt. That's how I was able to access that information, by going curly bracket, prompt dot value. I hope that helps. But yes, this will be, all this is available for you guys to play around later. Does it is there a way to merge this arena? Follow-up question. Ooh, that's a great one. Yes, I believe so. The question is there a way to persist the arena responses so that the follow-up questions can be answered and considered? Yeah, 100%. The thing that is causing for that to be refreshed is because here in the new match, I'm setting the I'm doing clear. That's why I'm clearing all these boxes. But if you go into the if you go into Retool AI, you can actually generate all that, so it keeps the previous context up, and you can write a system message there. It's just for the exercise. I just had it, so it didn't keep that information. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, okay. There's this question about if we have app templates or samples for that use case specifically that is being brought up about comparing prompts. We do, this is more with like agents. We do have templates when you go into agents and click over here. There's templates that you can play around with. In terms of apps itself, I think there's people in the community who have created templates that you can play around with specifically, but I'm not sure if there's ones that compare models with one another. Like if this, I think, is the only one right now, but you have it now. About the So, okay, yes, so there's a question about the event handlers, and my understanding it shouldn't matter because the event handlers are in parallel according to this document. Yes, the difference is here that because of the way that I set up the variable, so let me go here. Okay, because of the way that I set it up, this is setting up the information that is going to be used for model A and model B, which are the variables. And therefore, if I click it too fast, then I won't be able to have the model string information by the time that it does ask the model A and the model B query. That is the reason why. If I click it again, I mean, it runs. There's no problems with that. The problem is that you might just see a tiny message on the bottom. So if you don't want that to show up for your users, or if you find that annoying, then that's how you avoid it. You just set up the new match before the model A query and the model B query. But you're right. You're right. Okay. Yeah, you can use, the question is, can I use AI models deployed in Azure within Retool? Yes, the same way that I said before. So you go into back home, you go resources, Retool AI, and then there you could just set up your own API keys. Well, when it comes, I mean, there's a question. Are you going to discuss specific prompts, wanting to better understand the scenarios when this will be used? So this is just for you guys to build along with. But again, there's many ways in which you can alter this. I mean, I've seen examples where you just have like 5 windows, each of them, being like a different model, and then seeing which one responds better. Um, I think it's just like, how do you like, this is just a simple like one versus another, and I'm asking questions like the Superman stuff, but you can be more complex and see which one is better for you, and then like go from there. But again, to be more specific about the prompts, we do have a video coming out in terms of how to write best prompts, and then also the rest of the week there's going to be more specific ones on how to handle either agents or how to handle different parts of AI in this, with Retool.
You've got a good question here that I wanted to just bring up real quick.
Sure.
In the Q&A, M asks, can you add context like spreadsheets or databases that the models can use to answer prompts and then compare which model summarizes and calculates the data? And that's absolutely something you can do. Maybe Angelique, if you want to click back over to the actual kind of edit interface and show the input to one of these models. So that we saw the prompts that we were actually providing as part of this. But you can see there in that input field, you can put basically whatever information you want. So that can be hard-coded text that explains your prompt, like you would put into ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude. But you can also use that double curly brace syntax that you're seeing there to include data from any of your other Retool resources. So if you have, when your app opens, say it runs a database query or pulls data from a text document or something like that, and that data is then available in your Retool app, you can use that double curly brace syntax to inject any of that you want to into the prompt. Obviously, depending on how much data you're pulling, you need to be concerned about the limits of the context window of whatever model you're using. So if you pull like Angelique mentioned at the beginning, an entire book's worth of data and you want to put that all in your prompt, you want to make sure you're using a large context model. But you can get very creative with those prompts and include data from all sorts of different places when you use those.
Yeah, I have another one for you that I can ask. Is there an additional cost or defined usage limit for Retool managed keys?
There is. I'm trying to find the documentation on exactly what that is, but basically, I believe there's both sort of an hourly limit in terms of like how much usage you can use in a given time period, as well as an overall limit. And the idea behind that is, we want folks to be able to get going quickly, but we also want them to, once they move to production, that's not something we're able to support using the Retool managed sort of keys, at least for apps and workflows. So that's where we encourage you to, go to that resources tab, again, choose your favorite model provider, bring your API key there, and then set that up. And then you'll be, beholden to the usage limits of OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever you choose, which are much higher than ours.
Mm-hmm. There's another question about, do you have a course or certification that we can take to learn Retool? Yes. There's Retool University. There's something you have access to, and it does it from like, depending on what level you are at. So if you don't even know like what SQL is or like JavaScript, then there's a course that Keenan just dropped the link in the chat, that helps you like even learn that stuff, to like how to get started with just the basic maneuvering of the interface to something a little bit more complex, specialized. But there's also videos on our YouTube channel that go into detailed tutorials, as well as documentation. Always has great examples and demos. Mm.
Cool. I'll take another one of these. Kate, how might this be modified so I can understand the cost of each query? That's a good question. And we'll get into this a little bit. Angelique gave kind of a preview of some of our agent stuff that we're going to get into on Friday. And there's a lot of different ways we can kind of break down the cost of that as we do that. But as far as looking at the cost of each of these queries, the metadata that the queries return often contains kind of the total number of tokens that were used as part of the query. I'm not sure if these Retool AI queries do that, but either way, you could also just make a direct sort of REST API call to the particular provider. I know OpenAI in particular, if you call the REST API to get a response from one of the GPT models, it will give you the number of input tokens as well as the number of output tokens that the model returned. So based on whichever model you were using, you could do the multiplication of, what the cost of that model is for each of those input and output tokens, and then basically sum that up. Right now, we don't have a way to kind of track that natively in sort of this interface, but part of the, thing about Retool that is great and helps people do whatever they want to do is that you can kind of make those customizations if you go all the way down to, calling the REST API directly, and you have the flexibility to do that math if you want to.
There's another question that I can have for you.
Cool.
When setting up your own API keys, are there any additional costs for using AI in Retool self-hosted?
Yeah. So if I understand the question correctly, once you have your API keys set up for the different model providers, we're basically just directly like passing your requests through to the model providers themselves, and you're paying for that usage based on whatever rates they charge. So that's kind of the main cost there. Outside of like the Retool monthly pricing, if you are kind of self-hosting, there's not an additional AI cost other than the usage that you're paying directly to Google or OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever's models you are using. If you're also kind of self-hosting those models as well on either Azure or AWS, there's that infrastructure cost, but that's not, again, something that's implied or put on you by Retool specifically. That's just the usage of the different models that you have. Yeah, and we'll take maybe this last one here from Don. Aside from self-hosting on AWS, what about local use? I need something local for testing and hybrid for production. I'd be interested in maybe you posting a follow-up in the community thread so we can investigate this a little more. This is kind of an interesting use case that I'm not sure I fully understand, but there are tools to run large language models locally on your computer, especially if you have one of the newer Macs or a Windows machine with a graphics card that can run it. But I would say that's not a particularly good use case for Retool. However, if you're trying to kind of experiment locally and then push something and deploy it into the cloud somewhere, that's maybe something that Retool could be useful for. But again, I would love to kind of understand some more specifics about your use case and what you're asking for. So yeah, I think that's great. I appreciate everybody's questions. And Angelique, anything last messages you want to say before we sign off?
No, nothing. Thank you so much for following, and I hope this was really helpful. I hope that you make use of it and that you modify it in your own ways. I would love to see different variations of this, like posted in the community, and then I would definitely be reading up or seeing what you guys have created and everything. Don't forget to sign up for the rest of the week. I'll be back tomorrow with another app and template that you guys can be using related to RAG and vectors.
All right. Thanks, y'all.